One day, after filming, they have these two monitors where the director's watching everything to make sure it's good. And I said, can I please watch the playback? And I hadn't done that. So they let me watch a scene I had just done. And when I saw myself on the screen, I'm like, wow, I did it. It was the best feeling. You know, when you try something new and you don't really know, it was amazing. It was just very humbling because it's hard. It's hard. And so that was just so exciting that when you really believe in your dreams, they can come to you in the most unexpected ways. Here I am trying to meet all these people in Hollywood and everything. Oh, please read my book, please make a movie. And it didn't happen. Then boom, I just happened to meet people. And I don't believe it just happened. I believe that's a plan that's supposed to happen in my life. And it's beautiful because it's through the connections with people that I really like. So it was incredible. And then being on the set with my son, of course, he's a very nice boy. People always remark, even the cashier at the grocery store, that he's very polite. So watching him play a bully was difficult. I was always crying the whole time. but he played it very well, and I was really proud of him. So yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so you mentioned how you really wanted to make one of your books into a movie. So with you gaining these connections with the director and executive producer, are they going to help you make your movie?
Possibly, but most importantly, I've learned what it takes to do it. And it takes money, of course. So you need investors. Initially, I just wanted to just sell my books, the rights to Hollywood, and then they make the movie. But they're essentially paying you to go away. And as a creative person, I want some say-so in the creative vision of the film. So I want to do it myself. And remember when Tyler Perry did Diary of a Mad Black Woman? And that made history because he did it himself. He made a Hollywood blockbuster himself. He didn't go to one of the big studios and said, oh, please make my movie. He did it. He owns it. And he has since opened his studio in Atlanta, which is very exciting. And then someone who works with him once told me that the best thing to do is do it yourself. Because then you own it. You own it. You get to say what happens, who plays what roles. You get to make all the decisions, and that's so exciting. Yes.
And I have another question on the biracial issue. So other than people's lack of understanding, what do you feel is another main issue about being biracial in America today?
Deciding where you fit in. So every human being goes through that struggle in life, no matter what your issues, of figuring out where do I fit in. So when you grow up as part of two or more different races that are very different culturally at times, and this can happen if one parent's Catholic and one parent's Jewish. I mean, it doesn't have to be race, but extreme identity issues have to be dealt with. Because you might have friends who are saying, you're black, I don't know what you're talking about. You're not white. And I have friends like that. And then you have your white friends who see you as what you look like, and it's very challenging. So I see myself as a chameleon, you know, that lizard that can change colors. I really feel like I'm a chameleon. I can be in different settings. I can be in an all African American setting and feel perfectly at home, and I can be in an all white setting and feel totally comfortable, and I can especially be in a mixed setting and feel very comfortable. So it's a huge blessing, but the curse is the challenge of figuring out where you fit in. So once you successfully do that, it makes you stronger because you don't sway to what others are telling you. You know who you are.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, my question is, what advice could you give to kids who are biracial today and don't really know how to basically not really fit in, but don't know where they're comfortable?
Yes. I would say shut out the noise. Stop, not all the time. You have to listen to what your classmates say. You have to listen to what people around you are saying. But shut out the noise long enough to sit down by yourself and focus. whether that's writing in a journal or just thinking or praying or whatever method works for you. Just stop and think, what do I feel? Who do I think I am? Not what my aunt said, not what the kid at church or the synagogue or wherever said, or not what I saw on TV. What do I feel? And it's very difficult to do that when you're like 10, 12 years old because you're so influenced by your peers and your environment. So it takes time. It really didn't hit me hard until I was 19 in college, and that was very challenging because I was at U of M. It was very tense racially. Even Jesse Jackson came to town, and it was on the national news because it was so, there were rallies and protests, and where did I fit? I really didn't fit anywhere, so I became a journalist where I could hide behind the headlines in the newsroom. I didn't have to be out in, it was really, I think that's why I became partly because I was at the Daily, the Michigan Daily, and I was there doing what I was supposed to do as a journalist, and I didn't have to, I immersed, I lost myself in that, and I loved it, loved it. So, yes, you're welcome.
I'm going back to your script writing.
Yes.
Is the script you're writing for a producer, and if so, who is he?
I don't know who well, raising the funding myself, I'll be the executive producer.
And when are you holding castings for the roles?
I'm serious.
Great question. Okay, well please, I can coordinate that through your instructors, and that's excellent.
First of all, I think it's real profound that you became a journalist to hide behind the headline. Instead of telling your story, you were telling a lot of other people's stories. So that's pretty profound. But going back to the reel, when you talked about your father lifting you up in the hospital and calling you the Princess of Peace, do you think you lived out your father's prayer? Are you living out your father's prayer? I mean, where do you think we are today with the racial divide? Because there are still tension, you know, within communities. And so where do you feel you are in that journey of being that Princess of Peace?
I love that question. I was just writing about it recently. It wasn't until I was 35 that I learned of that he did that. I was reading his journals, and I read about my birthday. And so I was 35, and by then I was already published, and I was writing books with a racial message. So I thought, oh my goodness, I'm doing what he asked God to help me do. And he never told me this, ever. I've never heard the term when I was growing up, Princess of Peace. And so I realized I'm already doing it, and it must have been an influence of how they raised us, because my parents were very loving and gentle and encouraging. So I believe that, yes, I'm making a difference. I also believe that there's a lot of tension still in the world, and we have a lot of work to do, but I see signs of hope. I was with my son recently. It was Spirit Week, and there was two girls. It was twin day. It was, one girl was African American and one's white, and they said, "We're twins." And I'm looking at them like, oh, really? And they said, "See, we have the same hat, and we have the same shoes, and we have the same belt," and they're showing me everything that's the same. And the color of their skin did not matter to these 13-year-old girls. And I almost started crying, but I didn't want to embarrass my son, so I didn't. So when you see things like that on a level of young people viewing the world in a very different manner, where race is not a factor in determining who your friends are and who you're twins with, I was just so inspired by that. And there are tremendous examples of progress. Obviously, we have a president who's biracial, who calls himself African American. That's huge. And the historic rise in academia and corporate America of leadership that's African American is very, very important. And yet, the racial divide in terms of the socioeconomics of the world is very disturbing. That whole rich getting richer, poor getting poorer.
Do you feel that it's an issue whether somebody who's biracial defines themselves as either or? Do you see that? I remember when Halle Berry won the Oscar, and she got up on stage and she said, you know, this is all for, you know, I don't know verbatim, but she defined herself as a black woman. And there were people who, white people, were a little offended, saying, well, wait a minute, her mom's white.
Right.
So where do you think that is when people start defining themselves? It's in her, and she had a really profound story. Her mom, being white, said, what do you see yourself as? And she said, I see myself as a black woman. So that's how she defined her. Do you think that's still part of the tension, is where somebody individually defines themselves at?
Absolutely, yes. I think it's so important for that person to decide who they are and how they want to label themselves. Sometimes people like Halle Berry do it because she knows the world and Hollywood is viewing her as an African American woman. She understands how she's being perceived, so she chose that role. And I think President Obama does the same thing. He knows how he's being perceived. People aren't stopping to say, oh, but he has a white mother. They're calling him the black president.
Sure.
You see what I mean? So that doesn't discount the fact that he loves and adores his mother. And the video that was shown during his election of his family with his grandparents was so beautiful. They didn't talk about it, they just showed it. And that was so powerful. So I think it's very important for people to self-identify. However, I really understand in certain settings that choosing African American over white can help if you're working. I've been told in business that I would do better with African Americans if I dyed my hair darker color. Like, I'm not going to change how I look, just that's not authentic, that's not real. So, but some people do feel pressured that if I'm going to be in this realm and I'm going to do business and have relationships, I need to conform in a certain way, starting with calling myself African American.
Sure. Do you feel pressure, and I'm going to throw it back to the YNN kids here, because this is what it's all about, is Youth Neighborhood News and YouthVille News. But do you ever feel pressure to live up to your father's prayer of being the Princess of Peace? Do you ever feel it's a lot of weight on you, knowing that's what he prayed for you?
Sometimes I think about what bigger things can I be doing, and I think by doing movies and books, I am doing big things that have infinite potential. And then when I question it, I stop and think about the power I have on a personal level that shows tangible results. For example, you know, in the lunchroom, there's always the black table and the white table, right? No? Not at your school? That's great. But when I grew up and where I worked, there was the white table and nobody sat together, and including where I worked in one of my first jobs. And so one day I was sitting with my African American friends, and some of my white friends came over and said hi. And another day I was sitting with my white friends, and African American friends came and said hi. And they still sat separately. But then one day, because I personally had introduced them, I went in the cafeteria and they were all sitting together. And so I literally saw myself as a bridge. I had united these groups that for years had sat separately. See, I thought that was really deep, profound.
It's small steps.
Yes.
Princess of Peace.
It matters.
We're actually running out of time, so I just want to, thank you on behalf of YNN for being here, right, everyone?
Yeah,
Thanks to
Oh,
Elizabeth.
thank
It was
you.
a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. It's a
on our
delight to
show.
talk with you.
And, of course, this has been Youth Neighborhood News in collaboration with YouthVille News, YouthVille Detroit News. And thanks again to Elizabeth Atkins for being our guest. And thanks for our wonderful host today, Markaya.
You did a
You
great
did a
job.
wonderful job. And all of our Youth Neighborhood News reporters, thanks for being here.
Thank
and thanks
you.
for watching.